Welcome to the Edges of Lean. I'm Bella Engelbach, and in this podcast we explore the human and creative side of lean thinking, unusual places where lean thinking is practiced. We meet people who are practicing continuous improvement in many different flavors and styles. So come along with me on a journey to the edges of lean.
Episode 47, Continuous Improvement and Finding Your Givers with E.A. Csolkovits. E.A. Csolkovits is the founder of Givers University. He's been in business since the age of 16, but he's not just about the financial side of business. He's fascinated by observing people. He's also the kind of person who's established and owned a 1,000-acre wildlife sanctuary. He's a commercial pilot. He has a second-degree black belt in martial arts, and he's an advanced PADI certified scuba diver. EA is here to talk to us about what he means by a giver and how you find the givers in your life.
E.A. Csolkovits, welcome to the Edges of Lean.
Thank you so much for having me on your great podcast, and I look forward to being able to share, hopefully, some great nuggets with your listeners to the point that they'll even want to listen a couple of times because of so much content.
That's awesome. Thank you. That sounds great. Tell us about EA and what are you doing and how did you get to do it?
Okay. Well, that's a great question. First I should warn your listeners, I never say anything in 10 minutes if I can say it in 20. So, so with an open-ended question like that, I'm ready to go. All right. So I live in Michigan now, born and raised in the Chicagoland area. And my father was a milkman. This is many years ago, decades and decades ago. And back then, the milkman basically had his own truck. My dad had his own truck, one-man operation. He used to deliver milk to people's houses, and they had this box outside their house. There was a milkman's box, and there was money in the box. You know what was amazing, Bella, was that back then, all the milkman boxes had money in them, and no one ever touched the money. Different times.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Different times, and milk was in glass containers, glass gallons. They went to plastic probably how many I broke helping my father on his route. So we got to figure something else out, and they went to plastic. But and I certainly have fond memories of helping him at the ripe old age of 5 years old. But watching him getting up at 3 a.m. and back then only the big 18-wheelers were refrigerated, so the delivery trucks weren't. And so he had to chop up ice. So they had these 6 foot high blocks of ice, and I would watch him with an ice pick chop these big blocks of ice up with an ice pick, and then he had these big tongs, and he'd take them and put it on top of the milk in the truck, and that's how he kept it cold during the summer when we were delivering the milk, because nothing was refrigerated back then. There's just a big one. So, and it was just, and the thing that was interesting, Bella, was I watched my father get up without anyone telling him get up and go to work. He just did it. He got up at 3 a.m. and he went, and that was it. And he wasn't punching a time clock. He didn't have someone looking over his shoulder. It was his own route, quote unquote. And, and he had his own customers and worked for Twin Oaks Dairy, which was the dairy out of Chicagoland area. So but my upbringing was very underneath what you'd say medium, average income kind of. If you figured out what medium lifestyle was or average, we were probably one little notch right underneath that. I mean, we got by. I had plenty to eat as a kid, and the reason I knew that is my mother always said, "No, you've had plenty." So I know that. So I always knew I had plenty to eat.
But your dad was working hard physically in order for that to happen. That was
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and every day, and so I watched it and witnessed it, that you don't, to go on with whatever you need in life, you don't need to have someone standing over you saying, you need to do this thing, or this is what you want to do, and this is what you said, I'll go ahead and do it, right? And then at 16 years old, Bella, I took my first big step into becoming a success, and I became a janitor. Now,
wow, good for you.
I didn't mind doing that because business was always picking up. What?
All
right, so if our listeners are still with us at this point, I can tell them what happened. I might have just lost them. Anyway, so and at 16 years old, I worked for this janitorial service, and I was able to be bonded, which means insured. So, if my buffer hit something, some piece of equipment, the insurance company would pay for it. That allowed me to be in expensive places and allowed me to be in expensive homes. And every Wednesday, I cleaned the lady's home. I was there. She had a full-time maid and butler. I was there to clean the swimming pool and buff the floor. She had special tile and all that kind of stuff in the garage, that kind of. And when I make the name reference, it won't mean anything to your listeners. Until I make the movie reference, then they'll probably know who I'm talking about. So there was a movie a few years back, and the movie's name was called, or the title was called The Founder. It was about McDonald's. And
Ray Kroc, the Kroc family.
Exactly. And Michael Keaton plays Ray Kroc, right? And I want to let you know that I lived there. I lived in the Oak Brook area where the world headquarters of McDonald's was for decades and decades. It has since moved, but decades and decades, it was the world headquarters for McDonald's was in Oak Brook, where I lived, right? And at the beginning of the movie, so I lived the whole McDonald's experience. In the movie, I don't know if you caught it, but Michael Keaton as Ray Kroc, calls McDonald's #1, the first franchise he opens. That franchise in Des Plaines, we drove by probably 200 times at the end of my dad's milk route every day. So, I remember seeing when the sign said 1 million hamburgers sold, and I thought, 1 million hamburgers, that's more than I can eat in a day.
That's a lot. That's a lot of, yeah. So if you couldn't hear that, what he said, that's a lot of hamburgers, right?
Million.
So a million hamburgers, and now the signs say billions and billions sold, right? Because there's just a few more than a million have been sold.
Yeah, they've actually done statistical analysis most recently, and McDonald's is responsible for feeding 1% of the world population every day.
That's incredible.
How's that for a number for you? But anyway, I mean, those are real numbers. Those aren't just made up. Those are real ones. So based on McDonald's volume and sandwiches, et cetera. But anyway, so in the movie, first of all, I want to say, the movie in the beginning says it's based on a true story. That's true. But it's not the true story. That's not what happened, right? It's all Hollywood spin. They paint Ray in a way Ray Kroc was not the way he was in the movie. I mean, that's all Hollywood spin and drama to try to get people, you got to have a bad guy and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't that way. But there are many events in the movie that are nodded to that actually did happen. In the movie, Michael Keaton playing Ray Kroc talks to a lady outside his office all the time. She's in the whole movie, and he says, June this, June this, June that. That lady's name is June Martino. That lady, June Martino, is the lady whose house I cleaned every Wednesday. So when I met her, she had the third most controlling stock in McDonald's. So she was an icon already in the area. Everyone knew who June Martino was. She was worth more zeros than I had fingers and toes. So, and so here I am cleaning. And here's the thing, Bella, that was so astonishing to me. I don't know why, but I thought up to that point, here I am at 16, right? That in order to be rich and successful, you had to be a jerk. You had to be me only, me first, be willing to squash people and step on people and climb your way up by taking advantage of them. I don't know where that came from. I was wrong, but I had that thought. And she was so the opposite, it wasn't even funny. You couldn't have thought of a more opposite scenario than the way she was. So approachable. So nice, so easy to talk to, and yet she was a full-time maid and butler. I'm here. She's got a janitorial service doing the heavy work in her house. It's a $1 million mansion back then. I was 16, right? Who knows how many millions that house is worth now. It was in a place called Ginger Creek, which was basically an annex to the Oak Brook area in Chicagoland, suburb of Chicago, where the world headquarters was. And I was astonished by how approachable and nice this lady was. If I had my head down and I was buffing, and she walked through the room, even if I didn't look up, she would still say hello. Just that kind of, and that was so curious to me. I thought, how can that be? What is she, some kind of anomaly or something? Because I thought, rich people and successful people weren't this way. How did this happen? And that was astonishing to me, Bella. It really was. And she told me one day. I asked her about the whole McDonald's thing. I got up enough courage, not no 16-year-old shaking in his janitorial boots, goes up to her, and I'm going to ask the icon, June Martino, a question. But she knew who I was. I was in there every week, so she, when I approached her, she knew she had said hi 100 times already, and hello and that kind of thing. So I asked her if she could tell me all about it. So she told me the McDonald's story. From where she started working for Ray when he was a milkshake mixer salesman for Prince Castle, all the way to when he met the brothers, the McDonald's brothers, all the way up to virtually the minute we're standing in her kitchen. She even had the maids and butlers bringing us food so she could keep telling me the story while her and I are sitting in her kitchen. And I kept thinking, this is June Martino. What's she doing telling this snot-nosed kid this whole story all day long? I mean, it was just, I was still kept looking around thinking, there must be someone else here. There's no way she's telling me this story.
So why do you think she did that? Why was she doing that?
In retrospect, I can share with you that I think June sensed, she was a smart lady. And I think she sensed when I asked her, it wasn't because I wanted to get next to the icon June Martino. It was because I really wanted to know what happened.
So
and I think she knew the difference, and because of that, made the investment in time, because it was something I genuinely was interested in. It wasn't I was trying to schmooze myself to get close to the icon June Martino.
She must have been interested in your curiosity.
I'm sure she was, and I think she knew I really meant it. I mean, what happened? And she told me about how Ray influenced her life and how, for all intents and purposes, he was her mentor. And, I didn't know what a mentor was when she was explaining all this, but she did say how he influenced her in a huge way. And I remember thinking, Bella, I need a Ray Kroc. That's what I need. I need to find me a Ray Kroc. Where would I find someone that could put me under their wing and teach me all the things I don't know? Because all I know is, I know I don't know it. Whatever it is, I don't know even what it is I'm supposed to know or what I don't know. And I need to have someone teach me what it is.
So what were you at that age of 16 working as a janitor? I'm sure you were going to school at the same time. What were you thinking you were going to do when you grew up?
Well, first of all, I was very fortunate. All 4 years of high school, they call it high school in where I was in Chicagoland area. And I was on what's called the work program. So I only went to school 3 hours in the morning from 7:30 to 10:30 each day for all 4 years. And so I was very fortunate with that. And I was, of course, breaking all kinds of child labor laws. I could say, so many decades ago. But, I was working 40 to 50 hours a week all through high school. Because I watched these teachers who would put their feet up on the desk and they had holes in their bottoms of their shoes, and and my shop teacher who only had 3 fingers, and all these people. I thought, if these guys knew how to do any of the things I want to do, they would be doing it part-time. They're not even doing that. So I thought, man, I need to find some. I had a reality of I didn't know what I needed to know. And that I knew there were people that knew it. So I didn't know what I wanted to be. I just knew I wanted to be it. In other words,
whatever it was. Yeah.
And I was being molded. I was just saying, I knew I wanted to be rich and happy. Not realizing I even had those two backwards, Bella, because we actually should be happy first and then rich. But at 16 years old, I'm all about the money, right? I mean, show me the money. And so, how am I going? Here she is, I love pulling out June's Rolls Royce to clean her garage because I'm sitting in a car that's 10 lifetimes of my income. And at night I would go home and I would drive my Rolls Canardly, which basically is a car that rolls down one hill and can hardly make it up the next. So, and I just wanted a Rolls Royce. Man, if I could have one of those, I'm a 16-year-old, right? And thinking all those thoughts, but I knew I had a desire for those things, and I knew I didn't know how to get there. And so
your first idea was it's probably not getting up at 3 a.m. chopping ice, right? It's not, right? And the people who have it, this was your idea, was that the way they got there was by being incredibly mean and cruel and avaricious. And June Martino just flipped that around for you.
Yeah, it really happened that way, and she was such a curiosity for me when I was buffing the floor, and I would watch how she interacted with the help. She had a full-time maid and butler, and it never condescending, always nice, and I would just and I came to the realization, while buffing her floors and cleaning her swimming pool and built-in swimming pool and everything else, and I came to the realization, well, she's like a regular person. She's not like I don't see any. She's not like an alien. I don't see anything that, that is some spectacular super thing she does that no one, she just seems like a really nice, kind person. So I came to the realization that it's one of two things. She knows something I don't know, or she's doing something I'm not doing. And I realized later on it was actually both. She knew something I didn't know, and she was doing something I wasn't doing. But other than that, I thought, well, I mean, she's a regular person. I'm a snot-nosed 16-year-old. Whatever she learned, I mean, I could learn it. I could learn anything I want to learn if I just want to learn it. And whatever she did, I mean, I could probably do it too if I just learned how to do it. If I learned the skill, someone could teach me. And it was really in its most basic, elemental kind of frame of thought of a snot-nosed 16-year-old son of a milkman, burnt-out janitor, thinking that it has to be one of those two things. Only to find out it was both.
It was both. It was both things. So flash forward a little bit for me.
Yep.
So you graduate from high school. I guess you're heading out in the world. At what point did you get into business?
Well, it was there was two big events that happened while I was a janitor. The one was, of course, meeting June Martino. I call that my eye-opening experience. It opened my eyes. And up until then, I had been blind in ways I didn't realize. And then the second experience that happened when I was a janitor was we had a phone call came in our janitorial service for a guy coming in from Michigan to open a diamond store, and he wanted to see some carpeting. My boss sent me over to show some carpeting. This man and I hit it off. He offered me a job. And he became the father I never had, even though I had a father. And I became the son he never had, even though he had a son. And he became my Ray Kroc. And
so he was that mentor that even though when you didn't know what a mentor was, that you realized that you wanted that, you needed that.
He had those things, he had, I mean, wealth was permeating out of his cells, I could just tell, and he was happy, and what you would think of success and prosperous if you sort of painted a picture in your mind, and so I just locked in. I said, man, here he is. Here's my Ray Kroc. My question has been answered. My question of where would I find him? There he is. And so I became, because of what he taught me, I became such a huge advocate for mentoring. The reason people need Bellas in their life is because Bella can bring a perspective they cannot have. And I use the example of, if you looked at a football game, there's a reason the coaches are on the sideline. They don't stand next to the quarterback. If they stood next to the quarterback, they would see the same thing he sees. Right? So, but when you're on the sideline, you can whisper in the quarterback's ear through a microphone and say, look at that big guy coming on the left side. He's about ready to knock you down in a big way. Because you have a different perspective that the quarterback is not able to have because he's in the game. That's why people need Bellas like you in their life. So you can give them perspective of things they're not able to see on their own because they're not able to. They're in a different place.
And I think it's really important to think about, because we talk about mentoring and we talk about coaching, that mentoring and coaching, apart from there being like a sports example, are not the same thing, right? So mentoring is exactly what you're talking about. This is this person who has perspective, who has experience, who can, in effect, watch you, can tell you the lay of the land, can tell you, here's what might be coming up next. Whereas a coach is somebody who helps you with your own thinking. And many people find that having a mentor and a coach, it's good to have both, right? You can have both. And you'll find them in different places. Sometimes a mentor coaches, sometimes a coach mentors. But it's really valuable. And it's especially, if I could just take another aside, EA, it's especially valuable for women, because men, I think, there's sort of this pathway in business where men get mentored. Women often don't feel that they should have a mentor, or that they deserve a mentor, or that you have to be at a certain level to have a mentor. That none of that is true, right? You could be 16.
For sure. And thank you for making that distinction, because I wholeheartedly concur. And that and to lock in just sort of, if I can, for the moment, on the mentoring part, because there is a distinction for sure. Because we can have coaches that teach us how to do certain things at any one moment in time, where a mentor is more of a life commitment. You're committed to the person. It's a much more intimate relationship, and they're watching you closely, and and living things with you, if you will. Whereas a coach can just a coach can teach you how to do a thing, if you will. So mentoring specifically, I can share with your listeners. I've had people say, well, I can't afford a mentor. I can't afford a coach. I am the first one to say, the fact that you said that proves you need one. You just answered why you need one, because if you can't afford one, there it is. In my world, if you don't have mentoring and if you don't have coaching, we call that, Bella, there's one word for it that I use, and it's a little strong, but I say it. I'm not afraid to identify the elephant in the room. If you don't have a mentor and you don't have coaches, in my world, we call that naive. That's what we call it, right? You think you can do it, you can figure it out, and you know how to do it all on your own, and all you're doing is going to be making a whole lot of mistakes that someone else has already made, and they could compress time and lost fortunes into you merely having them help you. Now, the difference, again, to sort of skew towards mentoring specifically, different than coaching, as you very astutely pointed out, I can say the following. Over the years, I've met many educated idiots. Now, the distinction there is, an educated idiot is a person who's going to spew book information to you that they learned, but they themselves truly have never done it. When you want a mentor, now not coaching, it's a different thing. When you want a mentor, you've got to be able to ask one question. What have you done? Don't be afraid to ask that question. And if they're not able to, then all you're going to be doing is paying for their education at your expense. Hence, educated idiot. So when you get a mentor, you want someone who's done it, because here's the critical point. Yes, it's important that they've done it. But when someone has done it, Bella, they also bring with them automatically all the things that did not work. That's where the wisdom is. That's where the wisdom is.
And this is very interesting from a lean perspective, from a continuous improvement perspective, because one of the things that we think is very important is that you learn from your mistakes, right? But it doesn't make sense to learn from mistakes if there's knowledge available from somebody else having already done that learning. Right, that's the key. Just to kind of take it back to something like lean product development. The key to developing a product quickly is not to go ahead and make the mistakes that somebody else already made in developing a similar product. Right, that is a complete waste of your time. You only want to make new mistakes in learning new things that haven't been learned yet. So this is incredibly important. It is not necessarily good for you to make mistakes that you don't have to make when that knowledge is available, if you can find a way to get it.
And they end up costing us time and money that we don't need to spend either one of those, because it's a foolish spending of money. I could use, and I totally agree with what you said, and I love the way you're summing up some of the thoughts so that your listeners can get the extra, the real power of some of these things that were taught to me. I didn't make up any of these things. They were taught to me by people smarter than me, specifically my mentor. Mm-hmm. But as an example, to demonstrable, I became a commercial pilot. And when I was getting my private pilot license, I had an instructor with me that was teaching me how to fly instruments. It's a special rating for flying planes in the clouds, and so I landed the plane, and he looked at me. And he said, "Well, I guess it's true." And I said, "What's that?" He said, "Any landing you can walk away from is a good one." And I sort of chuckled, and he said, what was that? And I said, well, that was a landing. He said, no, it wasn't. He said, that's a fast way to make all your passengers throw up. He said, that's not a landing. And I said, I'm already a private pilot. I passed my check ride. My instructor taught me how to do this. My CFI, certified flight instructor, he taught me how to do these landings, and I've done them, and he said they were fine. And I had a FAA examiner said my landing was okay. I passed my private pilot. He goes, I'm telling you, that's not a landing. He said, that's a gut-wrenching experience that you can barely walk away from. He said, now, watch this. And he took me around the pattern. He came in, and we landed, Bella, and I couldn't tell we landed unless I looked outside the window. It was so soft and so smooth. And he said, now, you want to learn how to do that? And I said, yeah, man, that's like, that was a squeaker. I couldn't even, if I didn't hear the tires go beep, beep, like a little tiny squeak, where they're just sort of touching the pavement. And it was so smooth, I didn't, unless I looked outside, I would not have known we were landing. I still would have thought we were flying. He says, I'll show you how to do that every single time you come in. It's the same thing. He said, you were just taught wrong. And you didn't realize that there is a much better way. I'm here to show you. So not only did he help me get my instrument rating, but he taught me how to do squeaker landings. I use that as an example because I had been doing those landings over and over again, thinking I was doing great. How many of your listeners are thinking they're doing the right thing they should be doing over and over again, not realizing they needed someone in the right seat that says, what the heck was that? You can't call that a landing. And there's where the wisdom comes in. Do you agree?
I totally agree. And I have a very similar experience. So, and I talked about this when I was on Mark Graven's podcast. So I'm a singer as a hobby, and I'm taking voice lessons again at my advanced stage. And I have a new teacher who is also a vocal therapist. So she knows a lot about the anatomy, which I think some of my previous teachers didn't know. I mean, they just hadn't learned that. Almost everything I thought I knew about singing that I had been taught by people that I had paid money to, some of whom had careers in opera or who were, voice teachers that in some cases was sought out. Almost everything they taught me was wrong. I'm learning this now at my age. So, little too late for my singing career. Not that I would have had a singing career, but to me that it's just fascinating, right? That you can be taught these things, and they're actually, you can pay money to be taught these things, and they're actually the wrong things to do. Yeah,
I think I sang one time, and then someone asked me, "Can you do singing in the rain?" And I said, I think so. And I said, fine. Could you leave here and go outside and sing? Because we don't want to hear that. Go sing in the rain. That was my extent of singing. So there's so much for that. But I can share with you that from a mentoring perspective, and that's really one of the things I want to share with your listeners. If you don't have a mentor, get one. They're so important and such a vital part of our life and our success and prosperity, and from coaching. And I'm an advocate for using 10% of your income and putting that into self-growth. And I've had people say, well, I can't, we're barely getting by. I can't afford to do 10%. I said, do you know what you just said? The fact that you cannot invest 10% of your income into your own self-growth means you need to invest the 10% in your self-growth. Stop spending somewhere else, and then you'll never have to worry about all the money you need. I said, you're misspending it. I said, the best thing you could do is make that investment in self-growth, in coaching, in mentoring. And many mentors, some of the best mentors, don't want anything financially from you. They don't need it. They've already have it. But once they get it, that you really genuinely want to know, you'll be surprised at how open they can be, and how once they realize that it's genuine and sincere, and that you want to learn so that you can apply and help others, you'd be amazed at how many people will open up and help you and guide that path right for you. They're there. Those people are out there every day.
And one of the things that I do as a coach is I often suggest to the people that I'm coaching that they find a mentor, maybe more than one mentor if they don't have one. Because one of the things, as a coach, I can't see the field they're playing on. I only see them.
Exactly.
So it's really different. So tell us, EA, what is Givers University?
Well, we're an online university. We have online courses, and we have basically our foundation course series is called Give to Be Great. And that consists of 3 courses. The first one is the Giver's Mindset, second is the Giver's Lifestyle, and the third is the Giver's Lifelong Learning. And those are 3 courses that make up the Give to Be Great courses. Simply put, we teach one word: discernment. And that discernment is in relationships. And I think I'm right at about 190 interviews since last April. So my goal was 200 interviews April to April. And not one host has ever told me, I know someone else is teaching that, as soon as I go through the explanation right now. And that is, it's a skill and an art that's not being taught. Simply put, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, what you're teaching is discernment in relationships. So
what does that mean?
I think sometimes we talk about discernment in a spiritual sense, or we talk about discernment in, what type of career should we go for, but you're talking about relationships, which means discernment then about people.
Correct. And here's what we do. First of all, I say to all your listeners, I say this emphatically, we love everybody. I say it again, we love everybody. And we teach people a skill that's not being taught, and it's as follows. We teach people how to separate the person we love from their deeds, which we may not love. And we actually teach an observation skill, an awareness skill. Watch what they're doing. As we say in Givers University, your talk talks and your walk talks, but your walk talks louder than your talk talks. In other words, when we even have checklists. We teach people, and we have one that's called the 25 Do's. It's actually a checklist, Bella, of the 25 things you should be watching people do. Observe them. Watch what they're doing. And from these observations, you now begin to discern, because of what I see them doing, not what they're saying, because of what I see them doing, should I bring them closer into my life and become a part of what we call our Givers community? Because givers always bring with them the 3 W's of a giver: wisdom, wealth, and wellness. Or because of what I see them doing, their deeds, should I now begin discerning and respectfully, not rude or nasty, should I begin to respectfully distance myself from them? Because if I bring them closer, they're going to work havoc on my life and make me collateral damage. I ask your listeners, think about all the fires you stomp out. Think about when your stress level goes up. You know what they have in common? There's a name attached to them. And we teach people how to discern in the relationship. So when we say giver, we're not identifying and labeling a person. We don't label people. When we say giver, we're identifying giver deeds. When we say taker, it's not like, invasion of the body snatchers, taker, we're not identifying. What we're identifying is taker deeds. And we teach people to discern, who should you have around you? It's like this gentleman a few interviews back. He said, man, this is really great stuff. I read this book. It said I should have 5 good people around me. I said, you're right, you should. One question. Which 5? And all of a sudden he's staring at me with this blank look. I said, you see my point? No one's teaching us which 5, right? So that's what we teach. We teach which 5. Which people should you have around, not judging the people, but observing their deeds. And based on their deeds, which is what you're going to have to live with, should I pull them closer into my life? Or should I be respectfully distancing, and why? And we teach this even by very granular checklists, so that we're not stamping out fires not of our making, our stress level doesn't go up, and our productivity goes up because we're not wasting time putting out fires we didn't make.
So this is really fascinating from a lean perspective. And this, and you and I, when we had talked previously, we had talked just a little bit about this. So one of the things that we believe very strongly in the lean approach is that when people do things that sometimes we think are the wrong things, and this is why I need you to explain to us what you mean by a deed, it may not be because they themselves are a bad person, or they're lazy, or they're malicious. It may be because the system is working against them. And as leaders, we're the people responsible for the system. So for example, I call my doctor's office because I want a prescription renewed, and it doesn't get renewed for 3 days. It may or may not be because the receptionist didn't pass the information on to the doctor. It may be because the system that the receptionist is using doesn't allow that information to be communicated properly, and the doctor never sees it. And so I can't say that that person was or was not malicious. I actually don't know. All I know is the result, and the result is based on what happened in the system, or when the system actually causes us to make mistakes. So tell us what you mean by a deed, and then how do you account for the fact that systems can overcome good people?
Okay. Two things. And I'll address both those for sure. Happy to do it. The deed simply is the action. We don't get into the intent. We don't get into what someone meant or anything else. This is an observation skill where we separate the person because we still love them. We still love them, right? So we're separating the deed, and whether they're doing it, whatever reason they're doing for it, becomes insignificant. We know these are things they're doing. Now, so we puritanically look at the actions and the results, not, what did they mean by this? Because then that becomes very subjective and goes in all kinds of directions. I was taught this by my parents. I did this because of this. I'm doing this because of this. Now, I can share with you and expand upon, so hopefully I give definition to deeds. Deeds are their actions, and that's why we don't get into the subjective level as to their intents with theirs. We just puritanically go to, these are the things they're doing, and because of those things, do I want those things done in my life around me close or not, right? And so we help people separate the person from the deed because we love everybody, and then we begin to discern. Now, that doesn't mean you're rude or nasty or any of those kinds of things. It doesn't mean that at all. It means that there are certain people we're going to have a whole lot more time for than other people. And our lives will benefit because of that. There's some people that when you're around them, you just feel so much happier the moment you watch them walk away, and they're just that. So why go through that? You don't need to. You can just sort of begin to respectfully not be as available. Secondly, when we get into the system, I would share with you that my mentor shared with me a very important, profound thought regarding the system. He said, there's going to be many things that happen in your life that you won't have any control over. He said, in the medical community, if you're getting a treatment and you're not handling the treatment well in the medical community, they say you're reacting to the treatment. You're having a reaction, right? If you're doing well with the treatment and it's working on you, they say the patient's doing good. They're responding. He said, this is the key. When your intellect controls your emotions, you are responding. When your emotions control your intellect, you are reacting. Nothing good will come out of your emotions controlling your intellect. He said, so focus on having your intellect control your emotions because you're being responsive. Yes. So he said, when we go through life and these many things systemically, as you mentioned, may happen to us. He said, remember, you may not be able to change what happens around you. You're not going to be able to change your environment per se, things that may happen, I say. He said, but one thing you can control, which is the most critical, and that is how you view the event. You have the freedom of thought. You have the ability to reframe an idea. You have the ability to say why. When someone says something to you and all of a sudden you jump taking it the wrong way. I mean, a person, not you, Bill, it's a person. When a person does that and they take it the wrong way, is there value in simply stopping the train for a second and saying, can I ask what you meant by that? Or why did you say that? Instead of going off half-cocked, getting all upset, having the worst day ever, only to never find out that isn't what they meant at all. Simply asking that question. So when you ask why, or what did you mean by that? Now, if the answer is one that you're going to get a little PO'd about, at least now you're doing it in the right way. You're doing it on the facts. You're not doing it ignorantly, right? So one thing we can control about the system is the way we perceive it, our freedom of thoughts, on whether we're going to let it control us or we're going to control it. And the way we do that best is by labeling it in our mind with the 35 little conversations we have in our head to ourselves, from ourselves, every single minute we're awake. Statistically, 1,250,000 separate conversations per year happen from us to us in our head that no one hears. Those conversations are critical to how we perceive the system on whether it's going to control us or we're going to control it. It's our perception of it. Then from that, we know the right moves to make, and now all of a sudden, we're back in the driver's seat.
Interesting. Yeah. So when you're teaching people this, what's the thing that people react to the most? Where do people find that have the most struggle?
From what we teach at Givers University, realizing that how things really do manifest from their thoughts. I believe we have a God-given right of freedom of choice, but people don't realize that that freedom of choice also includes our idle thoughts. We have the freedom of choice to choose what we want to think about. And people just don't. They allow other people, and they become what I call them dependent thinkers. In other words, what they do is dependent on what other people have said and done to them or for them. They're dependent. What they think is dependent on what someone else says or does, as opposed to an independent thinker that says, I will keep and maintain my own counsel. And no matter what anyone else does to me or says to me, I still have the ability to reframe in my mind what's going on and give it the definition that I want to give it. And I have that ability. And that becomes an ongoing, never-ending. I've been working on this for 40 plus decades, and I'm still fine-tuning it, and it'll never be a never-ending process because there's always a new challenge and something we never saw before. So in the interest of time, because I can, as you have surmised, I could keep going. And
we could talk for a while.
For our listeners, to find out more, what I recommend is just you have two places to go. Number one, go to our YouTube channel. It's absolutely free. Go on there. It's Givers University, all one word. Givers University, no spaces. On YouTube. Yep, all one word, no spaces. Givers University. Look for a playlist that's called "How to Form Your Own Givers Junto Community." It's a playlist of 21 2-minute clips, all free, walking you through step by step. First, how to identify a giver community versus a taker community. We hear the word community thrown all over the place today. We identify the distinctions. Then step by step, if you want to form that nucleus of people around you, what do you do step by, in 2-minute clips? This is what you do, then this is what you do. How do you decide? Which people do you want to have close to you? Then how do you invite them? What are the expectational agreements? Then all the way through, even to the agenda. We have 4 of the 21 clips are devoted to, now that you've formed your group around you, what do you do? All right, so so go to our YouTube channel, find that. It's absolutely free. We give it. We want people to learn at it. We think it's vital. Secondly, then go to our website, giversuniversity.com. They'll see a place to sign up for our newsletter. It's absolutely free. We are not spammers. So the moment they sign up for the newsletter, they will get an email that they have to respond to. It says, do you want to talk to Givers University? If you do not respond, you will get nothing else from us. That's it, all right? So they have to respond. If they respond and say, yes, I want to get emails from Givers University, 2 hours later, they will get a spectacular checklist called the 25 Do's. These are the 25 deeds to watch for, that when you're discerning, you can actually, we want people, print it off, download it, use it, put it in your pocket, and then just go through and on the left side, make check marks, right side, and on the bottom, total it, and you're already down the path of where you should be in discerning those deeds. And then once a week, because we don't spam people, I hate that. You sign up for something, they're blowing up your mail, your mailbox every six things a day. Once a week on Thursday, we send out a newsletter, 5-minute read called The Giver's Toolbox. It's every Thursday. Thursday morning's the only time. And from that, they learn about Givers University here and there. And we're nurturers. So they're going to learn about us, our courses, things we have available. We put our interview podcasts, different podcasts on there and feature them on there. And it's a 5-minute read at best. The intention is that every week we give them one tool on Thursday morning that they can add into their relationship toolbox. It's absolutely free. Sign up for the newsletter. We'd love to have you participate and benefiting by the things we're providing out there.
That's great. Thanks. And can you just wrap up with your one piece of advice for that 16-year-old janitor out there, the young person starting out?
And it was a piece of advice that my mentor shared with me. Might have been a little bit past 16, but within a year or two for sure. And he talked me into saying 3 things to myself every day. This was over 40 years ago, 40 years plus. And actually, I just realized coming up on 50 years plus. So so I'm getting ready to have my 45th anniversary of my 21st birthday. So he talked me into saying these 3 things to myself every day. And I can share with you as fortunes came and went and came and went and came and went in my life, and the thousands of times we get tackled and we stand back up again. These 3 quick little phrases had a profound impact on my ability to choose my thoughts and to move forward no matter what the system did to me, or no matter what anyone else said to me, or no matter what happened. These 3 little phrases, I would pray that your listeners learn these and start saying them to themselves and watch how it helps you. And these 3 phrases are: I will never give up, I will keep rising up, and I will always overcome.
That's fabulous. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, E.A. Csolkovits, thanks so much for traveling with me to the edges of lean.
Thank you so much for having me on your great podcast.
This is Bella Engelberg, and I'd like to thank E.A. Csolkovits for being my guest on the edges of lean. Are you a giver? Who are your givers? We'd love to hear from you. Find EA at giversuniversity.com or on LinkedIn and start a conversation. Find me at leanforhumans.com or on LinkedIn, or comment wherever you watch or listen, and tell a friend about the edges of lean. Please join me in exploring more of the edges of lean. There's a lot to learn. And check out my friends in the Lean Communicators community at leancommunicators.com. You'll find more podcasts and videos with lots of great new content every week. The Edges of Lean is written and produced by Bella Engelberg with support from Podcast Inc. This is a Lean for Humans production.